Thanks for coming out for my talk. Just a quick interruption here. Mention this real quick. Also, for the next talk is on test containers. I highly recommend you attend that. Test containers are pretty awesome. If you're not using them yet, highly recommend you take a look at them. I'm Tim Spann. I do a lot around streaming, NiFi, Pulsar, Flink, Spark. I used to work at Pivotal maybe 1,000 years ago. So Josh knows me and tries to hide from me. Now that we're ready, let's start the talk. To make it easier, after I saw some people asking for slides, I made it as large and as easy as possible to get them if for some reason you want these slides. They're also posted in the app. Also, I've got like 5 polls out there. So if you feel like it, answer some questions. Looks good for me to get those. I also wrote an article that just got published, I think last night, on pretty much the same thing. So if you're interested in a little more details and a walkthrough of some of the code, just scan that. Again, if you get the slides, then you can get this link pretty easy. But either way you want to do that. I'm going to talk to you about using Pulsar with Spring. If you were here yesterday, Mary from DataStax talked a little more on background of Pulsar, so I'm going to skip a lot of that. It'll be in the slides, and I've got maybe 50 extra slides. So if you're bored on your plane home, you could read a lot of dull slides showing you architecture stuff. The coolest thing about the project is Matteo, the founder, told me, take a look at our logo, and I was like, it's kind of boring. And then he's like, look at that cover art, and that's where it comes from, so that's kind of cool. So I'm going to show you how to build Spring apps against Pulsar, but what's kind of cool about Pulsar is you don't have to use the Pulsar library, which, isn't the most developed Spring library out there yet. So you could use the one for Rabbit, you could use the one for MQTT, you could use the one for Kafka, you could use the one for WebSockets, and I'll show you a couple of things running just to show you how easy it is. And we'll do the demo. The poll I put out there, people said do the demo last. I'd probably be hanging out in the code all day, so that's probably smart. But quickly, I'll cover just a little bit of Pulsar pretty quickly. I know Mary did some of that yesterday. You may or may not have been in that session. What's kind of cool with Pulsar is one platform to do any kind of messaging, so you don't have to run Rabbit and Kafka and SQS and Pulsar and 20 other things. You could do all the different style of messaging under one open source platform, whether you run it on bare metal, VMs, Docker, Kubernetes, wherever it is. Guarantee you get your message. Very resilient architecture. Scale out really big. Infinite's kind of, I don't know if I believe with marketing on that word, but I've seen some clusters in China that have 20, 30 petabytes in RAM, so it's pretty big. It's scalable enough. This is my cat. So there's a bunch of people using Pulsar. So if you decide, hey, maybe I'll try Pulsar, you're not alone. You're not going to be the first company to do it. Some of them are quite large, like Splunk, like Comcast. These are pretty big companies that are pushing through some pretty big workloads, whether it's messaging or streaming or both. It's nice to be able to have a high-performance place to do both. Again, my cat, I throw him in there. Unified messaging, this is kind of cool, so I'll show you this in my code. I'm sending out messages from my little Spring app. Very Spring app, don't judge it, but, give me a pull request if you see something really horrendous. I know Josh already told me you better upgrade to 3.0 and JDK 17. Today I'm on JDK 11. When I get back to the United States, I'll move to 17. That's where our new code base is anyway. So I'll call out Pulsar, Kafka, AMQP, and MQTT from same little app, show you how easy it is. See how easy it is to consume those messages with different topics. And then I'll show you a really simple single-page app that's reading those same messages from a simple web page over WebSockets. There's a lot in this little diagram. Oh, it's pretty big up here. Key shared is kind of cool. This is kind of a way to do things that are streaming, but streaming very specific. If you saw the talk on Debezium, key shared is a nice one for that, because I can put a whole table in a key and then have one consumer do that, so I could do that in order, and I give different consumers do that at once. Failover or exclusive is the way Kafka works. So if you want to do Kafka, do it that way. If you want to do things like a work queue, you don't care how many people get the message, or you want as many people to be able to consume a message, as it comes in. Very easy to do that. What's kind of cool on Pulsar over some of the other messaging systems is the concept of multi-tenancy, and it's very apparent when you're setting up your system, because we have tenants, namespaces, and then your topics. So if you want to have 100,000 topics, you're not listing all of them in one place. You don't have to have 50 clusters to run your enterprise. You can have one, and you could federate them under one instance. Doesn't matter if they're in different clouds or wherever they are. And having those different tenants means it's very easy for you to host multiple companies, multiple business units, or just to be able to logically separate applications, put them all together under their own tenants and namespaces. So you could have realistic topic names, so they don't have to be weird names with names and numbers to try to squeeze them all in. Pretty nice there. Oh, my TV fell asleep, man. Pretty horrible there. I don't know if you guys can turn my TV back on. I'm watching a show there, but it's good to watch. The basic component of Pulsar is a message, as you might expect for something that's a messaging system and a streaming system. I'll go through this really quick, but you have a message, which is your payload. What's nice is, doesn't matter what it is. If it's something that looks like a database record, maybe it's JSON, maybe it's Avro, maybe it's protobuf. We can give it a schema. We got a schema registry built in, and then you could read it that way very easily. Schemas are very easy to use in the Java version. Same as with Python and some of the other ones out there. And you could add extra properties and things like that. But just to show you what's underneath there. This is some of the bare bones. If you wanted to do basic Java code and you don't want to do something fancy like Spring, this is the bare bones consumer Java code doing a shared subscription. This is the use case of, I'm going to send a lot of messages somewhere, and I want people to pull them off, do some code, acknowledge that they received it, throw it away. That is all the code you need to subscribe and get those events coming in. Pretty straightforward. If you want to do them failover style, which is similar to Kafka, exactly once in order. Failover means if this guy dies, fail over to another consumer, so you could just continue running. Pretty easy concept there. We also have the concept of a reader, because sometimes you don't want to do things in order, or sometimes you might want to go back to the first message you ever had. It's very common for people to keep a couple of billion messages in Pulsar, maybe a few hundred petabytes, because we have tiered storage out to S3 and ADLS and whatever have you, so pretty cheap. So if you want to go say, hey, let me go back 1 million messages, or go back to a specific message ID, or back a certain amount of time, you can use the reader interface just to scroll back and find your topics and start processing there. Or you could use the other consumers to go back to the earliest one if you needed to repeat maybe a whole topic worth of data. Hopefully you don't have to do that, but it can happen. So there's a lot of different ways to connect to Pulsar. That's why I like Pulsar and Spring. Like Spring, there's 10,000 connectors. Maybe you're not going to use them all, but if it's got the ones you really like, that's really nice. So I like this because this is an easy way to talk to your friends who aren't using Spring. And unfortunately, there's a lot of them. They're using all kind of weird languages, but we support a lot of them, whether it's Scala and Kotlin. Obviously, you can use the Java libraries for those, but they have their own libraries set up for them. Node.js, Go, WebSockets. Pretty straightforward. The top three, Java, Python, and Go, are very well supported, part of the main project, have a lot of examples, very performant. The Go one is pretty fast. We support lightweight streaming functions. Kafka people think of this kind of like Kafka streams. It's similar, not the same. I kind of think of it as like a database trigger. When something comes into a topic, I could trigger some bit of code. This is a nice way to do some simple routing, transformation, maybe some machine learning. Nothing heavyweight. We could either run that in our brokers, or I can run that in Kubernetes separately, or run that in your own environment. Kind of up to you. But I'll show you a simple one. So when I send my messages out of Spring, I've got to hit a topic. When it hits that topic, the function looks at the data and splits it out because it gets a couple different types of air quality data in one topic, and I want to split that out. We also have connectors. If you're from the Kafka and looking at the polls out there, decent amount of people have used Kafka before. So you've heard of Kafka Connect. We support Kafka Connect, but we have our own native sources and sinks. These are written in Java and pretty straightforward to write, but they're out there for most of the things you think about. You know, you want to connect to our friends Redis in the booth over there, Mongo, most of the NoSQL stores, most of the databases, and thanks to Alex and Debezium, you could talk to most of the Debezium CDC connectors and Elastic and tons of different connectors, whether it's a source for your data or a sink or both. This one is the one that makes Pulsar kind of next generation, is having these protocol handlers. And I'll show you that in the demo. This is very helpful for Spring, because you might say, hey, I've got existing code that uses Rabbit. I don't want to rewrite all those Spring apps. Point to a different Rabbit server, same ports, same topic names, and I'll just turn on what we call AOP, and that's our AMQP interface. Right now that supports the Rabbit one, 0.19. We're having 1.0 support is being tested. We've got the same for Kafka and MQTT, also for Rocket, which is more popular in China. So this lets you turn that on. So now Pulsar is also an MQTT broker and a Kafka broker and a Rabbit broker. And I've got that running on my little laptop if I don't overheat it and blow it up. We have native connectors for people who want to do things like Spark or Flink or Trino. Easy to turn those on. Tiered storage, very important. Again, these are all Apache open source. This is nobody's product. Open source, download it, start using it. Put it on your own Kubernetes. All the operators and things are out there. Very easy to use. Pulsar SQL is kind of cool. If you want to look at what's in your data and you don't want to have to write a client to read it, just you could use Trino, Presto, and boom, I got an interface to show me what's in the topic now. Makes it pretty straightforward. We mentioned Kafka on Pulsar. We mentioned MQTT on Pulsar. We mentioned AMQP on Pulsar. If we look back and forth, they might look pretty similar. What's nice here is they're the same. The interface is designed for anyone who wants to add additional protocol handlers to just drop them in. And a couple of big cloud companies have done that. It's very straightforward. What's nice is there's no difference between the native one and the Rabbit one and the Kafka one. So we support all those features that someone put into that. So it makes it nice. It's not like this is an add-on or it's something sitting on the side. This is a full-fledged part of the product to handle that. Rocket. I mentioned that schema registry, of course, important if you want to use schemas. And those could be Avro, JSON, Protobuf. And again, that one's open as well. If you want to add more, you could do that. What's nice is if you're doing Java and Spring, make yourself a bean, put some annotations on it. Now I've got a schema. As soon as I push that first message, it'll load a schema in there for you. You just pick which one you want, and it'll build the right schema for you. You could, of course, load and build those objects with something like Avro IVL if you want to do that. but I think it's easier just to build a bean, push it out there, let Pulsar do all the heavy lifting for you. We mentioned those functions. Again, these are not in Spring. I've got to test to see if I can make Spring work in there. I haven't tried it. I don't see why not, but it's already pretty simple. You just implement a function that gives you a context, and that context lets you access pretty much all the things you need in Pulsar, including sending to any topic you want, so it makes it easy to route. So it comes in from as many topics as you want to point to this function. You get all the data, you get it in the right object type in Java, you get the schema, and you get access to a logger. That logger can send it to the regular log stream. It could also send that, dead letters, and errors to another topic. So, you could use Pulsar to handle your errors. Pretty straightforward. If you see here, this is how I build the JSON schema. Just point to my class. Pretty easy. My key's pretty lame, but just to show you a key. And then you could add any properties along with your data and just send. What's nice is you don't have to know pretty much that much Pulsar here. You could even make it simpler. We've got a version of the functions that just uses a regular Java function reference, and then you won't get access to the context, but anything you return from that function will go into whatever you specify for your result topic. Pretty straightforward. Now, you could start pretty simply. This may look pretty familiar to you. In the United States, a FedEx truck is massive. It's this big thing. This one's on a bicycle, so I was pretty impressed. But if you want to start off, I'm running a full cluster on my laptop. You could do it standalone, just, it's standard Java app, just run the start shell script and you're ready to go. You could run a Docker container. You can run some mini cubes. You could use, there's some free stuff in the cloud if you don't want to have to run something on your machine. Pretty straightforward, though. This is my cat again. Pulsar and Spring, I say we're buddies because I worked at both places, so that means they're buddies. There's a great article that just came out on a good way to do shutdowns from the consumer. I didn't use that. Mine shuts down pretty easy. There's also a reactive Spring library for Pulsar. Now, with the talk of all the cool stuff coming in the future, maybe that's not needed, but having seen that run, and this was at Spring 1 last year, that's really fast, so you might want to check that out. There's also a Spring Boot starter for Pulsar. Again, you see how simple the code is. I don't know you need all that, but you can do it. The code to do Kafka, I just used a regular Kafka template. Pretty straightforward. Produce it, send it. And again, it's the regular Kafka code. We didn't change anything. All I changed is the property to point to my Pulsar cluster instead of the Kafka one. Same with MQTT, standard stuff. Pretty easy to do. Same with Rabbit. The Rabbit library is very minimal. The WebSocket one, I ran out of time to write that one, but the code is out there. I'll show you an example in JSON. The Presto one, again, just using JPA or JDBC, whichever Spring you want to do. Again, that reactive one, definitely check that one out if you're a big fan of reactive. It's very fast, and the code that's written out there is really nice. This is what my little toy app looks like, and there is a lot in that. I'm going to cut off this last part where the cat's in the box, because I tried to run all this on my little laptop with everything else, and it started catching fire, so we're not doing that part. I have that on video if someone's really eager to see how easy it is to connect with Flink or Spark, but this is not a Spark conference, right? So we don't have to show that part. So I'm just doing a REST call from Spring, super easy, and then that same code is just sending data out to a couple of different topics just to keep it simple. One's for Kafka, one's for MQTT, one's for AMQP, and one's for regular Pulsar. Once they get to the cluster, it triggers my Java function, and my Java function parses those JSON records and puts them in the right new topics. and those topics I'm listening to in my WebSockets app there, but I also would listen to it in the Spark app or in, say, a continuous Flink SQL app. Pretty straightforward, though. I also can get data from other sources. I do talks around Apache NiFi, which is pretty cool little system to grab data. And I grab that same data, push it into a Pulsar cluster, and then the topic could take that one in the function as well. Pretty easy to do. Oh, click too hard. Just to give you an idea, this is pretty much a typical layout here. Spring could be sitting in a couple of spots. You know, you could use traditional databases along the sides. Lots of ways to use this as your main place to distribute asynchronous messages, whether that's between Spring apps or apps in different languages, or between things like databases in Spring, Spark and Spring. Lots of different ways to connect without changing the libraries that you're using already. Again, you could use those existing Spring libraries for Kafka, MQTT, Rabbit, pretty straightforward. I say we're super friends, so let me get into the demo. I think we have a lot of time, though. We'll see. Hopefully everyone had coffee so no one's falling asleep. So I'm going to show you code and command line, so this will be exciting. So I've got a very simple application here, but I'll go through all the little apps. They're all in GitHub. They're all linked in the slides. You can get them pretty easy, so you can comment and go, that's bad code, Tim, fix that. This is demo code. Not putting this in production. Sure, there's a lot of things to fix in here, and I'm sure Josh will yell at me later because, again, JDK 11. So pretty straightforward. There's a lot of extra stuff in here, but the main things here are I just have some services to do my messaging through those 4 different types of messaging. Again, those could be 4 different systems. The only way you know that those are all Pulsar is because I've got it in my application properties where I'm pointing to localhost for Pulsar, localhost for Kafka, localhost for AMQP, localhost for MQTT, and those are all Pulsar. So just one cluster to do all those, listening on separate listeners there. And if you needed to, Pulsar can run proxies in front of those, and you could connect it with other things. It's those same ports that you expect. You could change them on a server if you wanted to, but easier to keep them the same way they are. So I just have standard configs for those. Grab those things, set up a Rabbit template, set up a Kafka template. Hello. Set up a Kafka template, and again with a fancy enable Kafka. If you've seen Kafka code, same thing. I'm just using the string serializer for that one. The Pulsar one is pretty straightforward. The only thing I've enabled is I've added, I could turn on security if I want to send it to my secured cloud. And I could turn on encryption and other things if I needed to. But for running localhost, I've got no security. Yay, makes it easier to demo. Also have some configuration for the producer. Makes it a little easier for Pulsar. Again, I picked the JSON schema. I could have picked Avro, Protobuf. All I'd have to change is this class here and point to the same thing. That's pretty much it to do that. The actual app is just reading a REST service. Really, really simple, doesn't do much. But reads from that REST service and gets back a JSON that tells me the air quality in different cities. And I parse those out to get the data. Not too exciting, but I hate using fake data because I want to show real data. It's a simple Spring app. I enabled scheduling so that it's just in a loop to just keep sending messages. So I hit those different endpoints, grab the REST point, send it to those different messaging systems. Not the most advanced code in the world here. I get that observation back, and I loop through my results, very sad. And then I just send it to those different services. This could be all different apps. There's a ton of different ways to do this, but just to show you as simple as possible, I can call all these different libraries in the same app, all of them hitting Pulsar, without not too much difficulty. Is that readable? Oh, it's not bad. I wonder where I can get a monitor this big at home. This would be nice. I don't know how far I'd have to sit back. I put on a lot of debugging stuff to know what's going on and make sure it's sending messages. The one thing that I get back from Pulsar, I don't from the other, is whenever I send a message to Pulsar and acknowledge that it was sent, I get back the ID. Now, if you want to do logging or put that somewhere, maybe you put it in a database, maybe I put it in another topic, that ID tells me exactly where it is. That's my pointer to it. So if I want to save that to go, hey, this is where I started at the conference, if I want to go back there with a reader, I could go back to that one and see what I sent and get all the information about that. So it's just in that schedule running. Here I've got a consumer for Kafka. So this is going to just listen and through the standard Kafka. We don't have any special libraries, so it's starting to get back Kafka data. And then I've got one. I'm like, well, if I do Kafka, I probably should do MQTT. So I've got one that's reading the MQTT one from the MQTT topic as that one gets data. That one takes a little warmer to warm up. Then we got the AMQP, and then we've got the Pulsar one. Let's see. Here we got AMQP rabbit data coming in. Again, it's all the same data. It's just going to different topics just to keep it steady. If I wanted, I could turn on only one of those and use that one topic for everything. You don't have to use rabbit to consume from a rabbit topic in Pulsar. If I push it in with Pulsar, I can read it out with rabbit. Or if I push it in with Kafka, I can read it out with Pulsar. Or I could have Pulsar, Kafka, MQTT, and AMQP read from the same topic using their native protocols. Could that be confusing? Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea, but you can do it. So we have a lot of data coming through. I'm going to stop that because I don't know how much data I can actually keep running on this little teeny box here. And I want to show you what that function looks like. I've added a lot of junk to this function, a lot of debugging, as trying to run all this on one machine is probably not the smartest. But I've got a little thing here that parses one of the fields of the data. Again, since the data has a schema, it comes in as an object. I'm just looking at the parameter name. If it's PM 2.5, which is one of the air quality fields, I'm going to put it in the topic that's for PM 2.5. Same with PM 10. The same for ozone. And so as data gets in, I'm just routing it different places. I could enrich it with extra fields. I could stop data from going anywhere. Lots of different things I could do in this very simple code here. Pretty easy way to do that. Now the consumers are exactly the same code that's the regular Spring library. This is the library for doing consuming from Rabbit. The only thing that's a little odd, when we create a topic for things like AMQP, the topic you use in Rabbit is just normal looking topic. When it gets built in the backend in Pulsar, it adds some metadata to the name so you know explicitly, hey, this is AMQP. But remember, we have multi-tenancy and multi-namespaces. So most likely, I'm going to build a namespace and a tenant just for Rabbit, just for Kafka, just for MQTT. You don't have to, but things can get a little messy and confusing. Again, I like to do that so I know who's going where, who's doing what, you know, what's going on with all this nonsense. Pretty straightforward. I've got a message listener for Pulsar. Pretty straightforward. Consumer message. The one thing that's very important for Pulsar is the consumer acknowledgement. As opposed to Kafka, in Pulsar, if I don't acknowledge the message, it hangs around. It'll hang around forever, unless you explicitly put something to tell me, delete the message regardless. Pulsar rather keep those messages. So what's nice is, say one doesn't get acknowledged, and it's a stream of 1 million records. I just dumped my whole database. Well, we don't have to stop. I don't lose anything. That one's sitting there unacknowledged. I could send that message again, get it acknowledged. What's nice is I don't have to be concerned with that code. The broker handles the acknowledgement, so it knows, hey, this wasn't acknowledged. I'm not going to delete it. I'm not going to lose it until you decide to acknowledge it. And if I say negative, then I didn't get it. It acts as if no one ever saw it. So that's nice. I don't have to worry about, oh, is that going to expire or something? No. But you have control of that, which is nice. What else can we show you here? We did Kafka. We did AMQP. Oh, we didn't do MQTT. Let's grab that one too. There's too many consumers. I was going to put them all in one Spring app, but then I had like a lot of things going on at once because they all want to listen asynchronously. I'm sure there's a nice way to do that, but it didn't look good for me, so I didn't do that one. Hello. Here we go. Too many projects in IntelliJ here. I should spring for the nicer version of IntelliJ. But pretty straightforward in any way we do these. Again, not too much heavy lifting to do consuming. It really depends on how you want to do it. All the libraries have a couple of options. The one thing I found that I liked for MQTT is using memory persistence. Otherwise, it creates some temporary files and random locations, and I accidentally push them to GitHub, and then there's all garbage in there. Maybe that's just me. Maybe your mileage will vary. But using the memory one seemed to be faster, too. But I don't know how many messages you're pushing through. I tend not to use MQTT consumers. I tend to use MQTT because I have something like a Raspberry Pi or a Jetson, and maybe I can't compile a new library there. Maybe there's no Pulsar available there. Almost all these devices have MQTT, so instead of having to run some specialized MQTT broker, just run Pulsar, get all those devices pushing there, and then, get it, and it can go right from there into Spark, or right from there into Flink or Kafka, whatever's works for you. We'll go back into some code if we get some questions. Again, there was a whole bunch of polls out there. We'll take a look if we have time at the end. This is me. Please reach out if you have any questions. I have a bunch of other slides, but not as important. Again, if you have questions, I'd rather do that. I'll look at the little app, hopefully see those. If you think Pulsar looks cool, there's free training online. This lets you try it out in Java, Python, Go, C#, I think C++. I don't know if we've got every language out there. I'm guessing most people here might want to do Java. Again, easy way to learn it. What's nice is it has a built-in VS Code spins up with a little Docker cluster for Pulsar, so you can try out everything, so you don't have to install anything, don't have to use somebody's cloud. Just log in there, try it out, see if you like Pulsar. Lots of links, too small for you to see. Every week I put out a little weekly newsletter covering a bunch of different open source, different projects, Spring and other things. If you have anything you want to send me for that, definitely send that out to me. This is my idea of what the Pulsar world is. This came up at the Elasticsearch conference. I was talking to some of their people there, and they're like, well, what does Pulsar do for Elastic? And I'm like, well, let me figure it out. Well, we could buffer. We could batch data together if you don't want it as a stream. We could route it. We could filter it, aggregate it, enrich it, replicate it, deduplicate it, decouple the systems, which is nice. So if, say, something's not available, like I got all my data out of my database with CDC, and my downstream system is not up, or I don't want to pay for it because it's Saturday, I want to wait for Monday, well, leave it in Pulsar. Nothing's going to go wrong there. You can restart later. Or if you want to take data from one place and distribute it, maybe it needs to be filtered, maybe data from your main cloud, your main data warehouse, needs to be sent in a small group to Singapore, into another database in America, different availability zones, different amounts of data because maybe data protection. Very easy to do that with Pulsar, especially with Java and Spring apps on top of that. Geo-replication is built in, so that makes it very easy for you to distribute messages between clusters. You just pick how you want to do it, and it'll do it for you, again, all in the Apache open source. Don't need any specialized system to do that. And you can replicate it between as many clusters as you want, whether it's active-active, active-passive, however you want to replicate. And support for a lot of different of the new systems out there. I have a talk with the Scylla people soon. We're doing like a half-day thing on how to best practices with Scylla. Besides having an awesome logo, they're kind of the successor to Cassandra. Very clean and fast, very easy to work with from Pulsar. We've got new connectors for Delta Lake and Hootie and all those kind of fun new buzzwords coming out. We do have a cloud that's free. We were started by the people who started Pulsar. I didn't mention Bookkeeper because Mary covered that, but Bookkeeper is the second part. Pulsar just does messaging and streaming. It doesn't store the messages. This is kind of the cloud native piece. Bookkeeper runs separate. It's a separate cluster. Obviously, they're well connected, but that project handles all the storage. Makes it very easy for us to be able to scale up, because often in messaging you have more brokers because I've got a lot of clients coming through. I need to scale that up. I may not need to scale up storage constantly or scale that down, but I may need to scale up how many brokers are handling all these messages. So that's nice. Just the ASF stuff there. I have a lot of extra slides. I'm going to look and see if people have poll questions. We got about 10 minutes before lights start flashing. Let's see if there's any questions listed in the app here. Here's one. On the huge load, is there any probability for fail down of Pulsar? Is there any solution like, I guess that's load balancer or Pulsar to handle these problems? As I mentioned in the beginning part, and Mary put in hers, it's really designed to scale to pretty enormous methods. I mean, that was one of the reasons why Yahoo created it, and it's used big at some pretty large companies like Tencent. It's used for some real-time gaming. It scales very well. Now, you could add load balancers, but again, the brokers to do your messaging are really small. Like, these are not these massive, nodes that you have to put out there, and you can scale those very easily. We also have a proxy layer if you need that to add that to scale out. The scaling is not really an issue there. Like I said, the size of clusters, 100, 200, 5,000 nodes, they could be as big as you need, and again, they could be as small as that little FedEx cart where maybe you're just on 1 or 2 nodes. Again, with clustering, I like numbers like 3 or 5, but, lots of different things there. Let me see if there's anything helpful in there. Just going through some of the backup things. I didn't want to have to walk through all these. Source code. Anything helpful? That's probably enough there. So that's the main question I saw there. Did I see any others? Oh, if I only use Kafka, does it make sense to switch to Pulsar? Well, because I work at the Apache Pulsar project, I'll probably tell you yes. If Kafka's not having a problem for you, you're never going to use another protocol. You don't want a project that you don't need to run from one vendor. Maybe you don't. I tend to not see that happening, though. I worked at Cloudera for Kafka. Anyone who's got a big enough cluster or enough clusters tends to have some issues that could be helped by Pulsar. And again, some people run both. I mean, it's very easy to communicate between them. We have sources and sinks besides having that Kafka protocol support. So we could, federate message between us, because you might have Kafka sitting in a on-premise cluster and you don't want to get rid of it, you can put Pulsar in the cloud and have them communicate. Use that as your way to add additional clients or scale up easier in the cloud. Again, it really depends. If you've got something working, should you change it for no reason? The performance numbers, we put a white paper out. It's a little bit faster in Pulsar. Is that enough to change? I think it's, are those other features helpful for you? Things like multi-tenancy, ability to run only one cluster, support for rabbit message, support for MQTT, support for other protocols. That might be enough. If that's not enough, I'm not going to yell at you for using Kafka. It's been around for a very long time. It's pretty stable as long as you don't get past a certain size. If you're using it and it's all working out well and you don't have to worry about rebalancing nodes, Pulsar doesn't need to rebalance nodes. If none of that's happening to you, or that's someone else's job, then don't worry about it. If someone changes your cluster and makes it into Pulsar, you'll probably never know. As a developer, they'll tell you, oh, point to this different server name, or even change the server name, don't even tell you. You don't really have to know. I mean, it could just change underneath you. There is a very large cloud vendor in Europe that hosts Kafka, but it's Pulsar underneath. They're one of our committers. So, you don't have to know if it's Pulsar, but it might be in there anyway. There's some people secretly using it that I'm not allowed to talk about, but it's pretty good there. Hopefully everyone answered those polls. There's 3 big polls there. I have some really end-of-the-day swag here that's very sad, but it's free. There's weird stickers not available anywhere else in Europe. So I don't know if that's of value to you, but that's down there. The next talk is on test containers. If you don't know test containers and you don't have a flight, please stay around. Test containers are pretty awesome. I've been using them for Pulsar testing, and we've added that to the main project for our next suite of testing. It pretty much tests anything, pretty awesome. So definitely wait for that talk. Let me see if we got 5 minutes. Any other questions? Let's see. Show more cat pictures? No, that was my question. Or I could attempt to take them out in this massive crowd here. Let's see if anyone added any more out there. How do you rewind and replay? Rewind and replay, there's a couple different ways. I mentioned that different interface, the reader one. We're also in the next version adding a table interface. That one should be done in the next month or 2. That'll let you easily kind of browse that data. The other option besides the reader interface, just somewhere in these way too many slides. Yeah, the 2 options, I could just use Trino and just do a query. Show me these records. Or I could do it with Spark SQL or Flink SQL. I could just go back to the earliest record and browse them if there's a key or something. If there's no key, I could use the reader to go back a certain amount of time, a certain amount of messages, or again, if I know that message ID, which I was outputting that when we're doing the produce, maybe I save that somewhere, maybe in Redis, my Redis friends out there, and then if something goes wrong or if I want to scroll back to that, I could just put that in there. This is a different Java interface. This is currently only available for Java. We haven't implemented it in Go and Python and 900 other languages yet. We will. How does Pulsar handle the scaling of topic partitions? We don't have to. It's pretty great. We support partitions if you like them. If you don't like them, don't use them. The way the data is stored, it makes it easier. Now, you can add partitions the way you do in Kafka and then map them to a consumer and have each consumer group do one. You could do that, or you could just let Pulsar manage it. In the next version 2, we're adding auto-scaling partitions. Again, partitions are optional, but if it is something that may improve your performance, you can just scale them out. And in 2.11, we'll have auto-scaling of partitions for the people who really like them. Again, something we're seeing is more people from Kafka are starting to use Pulsar. They kind of like that feature, so we're like, okay, we'll give you that feature. Any other question? I don't think so. I do not see one out there. Any in the real world? No real world questions. Cool. It's just like being on Zoom. Everyone's quiet in the background because they're watching Netflix. Or unless it's blocked here, because I can't reach US Netflix, so I don't know. It may not be blocked here. And they're probably blocking themselves now that there's 400 other systems out there to do the same thing. Well, if we got no more questions and no one wants to see some code, I guess I could give people back a couple of minutes. No reason for me to just talk about nonsense for another 3 minutes here. So if there's no more questions in the real or virtual world here, I'll give it one last check. I do, unless they're in random order. No, we did the rewind. Yeah, my boss would say definitely change to Pulsar because we've got cooler stuff. And my slides have more cats than the Kafka talks, so that's one reason. Otherwise, thanks for coming out. I don't see any questions. Go get your last bit of swag and free food, and definitely stay for test containers. Highly recommend it. Guy running it is pretty awesome. He covers a lot of stuff. If you're not sure how to easily test, integration test with lots of different things, whether it's Kubernetes or Docker or pretty much any database, and he's got it on the latest version. So check it out. Next talk. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, people are loud. Thank you.